Discover 12 sinister ghost legends of Colorado that remain terrifyingly unexplained and cursed. As Jane parked their old car at the bottom of the overgrown driveway, her heart raced with anticipation and dread. The place looked like it belonged in a horror film. An ancient, dilapidated house standing tall among dark, twisted trees, its peeling paint screaming neglect. Rumors of 12 sinister spirits tormented by haunting tragedies clung to the very air they breathed. Shivers crept down Jane's spine as she imagined them watching, waiting. "Mom, this place is awesome!" Max shouted, his enthusiasm cutting through the eerie ambiance. Lily giggled, clutching her brother, eyes wide with fascination. But Jane felt the shadows press in, thick with the whispers of townsfolk about the horrors tangled in the history of this land. Every crack of the porch echoed warnings, blended with the creaks of the old timbers, whispering of tragedy and pain. "Okay, kids, grab a box," she said, forcing a smile. The children bickered over who'd get the first choice, splashing their innocence over Jane's rising tide of anxiety. She took a deep breath, trying to shake the unease entwining her spirit. But curiosity, the town's secrets laced with danger, had its grip on her. A flicker of light danced across the room as they entered, shocking Jane. "The electricity must be dodgy," she muttered, but in her gut a chill settled. Max and Lily shrieked in delight, less interested in the ominous shadows creeping across the walls. As they settled into their new life, something strange began to unfurl. The lights flickered like the last gasps of a dying breath. Shadows twisted in corners, and whispers fluttered through the night like startled bats. Jane dismissed their claims as kids' imagination, but deep down, she felt the house cradling dark secrets ready to unfold. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. That night, a storm howled outside, rattling the windows. Jane lies in bed, her heart pounding against a stillness that felt too heavy. A distant sobbing, soft yet persistent, crept into her mind, a sound that churned her stomach. It was unlike anything she had ever known, a moan slowly suffocating her sanity. When Jane escaped her thrumming mind to speak to Mrs. Harrow, the sweet neighbor, a deeper chill washed over her. Mrs. Harrow's smile was sharp, but something glinted in her eyes like a predator's. Was that recognition? A shiver coursed down her spine as Jane turned her attention back to the kitchen counter. As she reached for the salt, the lights flickered violently, casting trembling shadows like spirits waging war against reality. In that fleeting moment, she spotted a picture, the former residents, captured in happier times. Children stood on either side of their parents, smiles bright yet haunting. A chill gripped her heart as she scanned their faces. Were they the lost children Mrs. Harrow spoke of? Phantoms trapped between joy and despair, their eyes reflecting a suffering Jane couldn't comprehend. With a shudder, she took a few grains of salt in her palm and headed back toward the hallway. The air grew heavier, thick with emotions and echoes of the past. A sudden thought struck her. Could the children's innocence be what tethered these spirits to the earthly realm? Was she, unknowingly, a pawn in a story much older than her? Without a second thought, she sprinkled the salt in a thin line at the base of the doorframe, breathless with anticipation. As the last brain fell, the oppressive environment shifted, letting out a soft ripple as if retreating momentarily. But in that lull, a new voice rose,
chilling her to the bone, a child's laughter bubbling up like a malevolent tide. "Mommy, we want to play." The words, sweet yet laden with hidden malice, caressed the air, beckoning Jane toward the shadows. Panic gripped her as she turned to run, but the hallway stretched impossibly long, walls closing in like a suffocating hold. She stumbled, heart hammering, fearing she would never escape the house's grasp. What awaited her in the depths of darkness? The shadow among shadows thickened and morphed, whispering her name. But from deep within the cacophony of noise, one thought crystallized. She had to uncover the truth about the 12 spirits, or risk losing everything she held dear. But would the history buried in those walls grant her the answers she sought, or pull her deeper into a nightmare of lost souls? Jane stumbled backward, each step weighted like lead. The call of innocent laughter twisted into a dagger in her gut, fueling her urge to break free from the oppressive shadows. She blinked, her world blurring with the chaotic churn of fear. "Stay together!" she shouted desperately. It was a thin thread of hope, barely holding her resolve. Behind her, Max and Lily peeked through the doorway, their small faces twisted with pure fear. Though her words were brave, her heart quivered. What had she dragged them into? With a jolt of adrenaline, she sprinted down the hallway, the salt line a flickering memory of safety behind her. As she approached the kitchen, the lights flickered again, casting a hellish glow on the walls. In the disorienting dimness, she caught reflections, figures moving, watching, whispering, always watching. She reached the kitchen, all thoughts of safety now drowned in the surge of terror.
Ripping open the cabinet doors, she rummaged through the clutter. Cans, dishes, and old jars tumbled out, clattering into the abyss of the cold tile floor. She needed something, anything, to shield her children from the angry spirits looming in the shadows. "Mommy!" Lily's voice echoed, soft and fragile. Jane spun around, panic gripping her throat. In the doorway, a flicker of light revealed Max with trembling lips and wide, frightened eyes. The salt line still existed, but it was eroding, the restless floorboards threatening to pull it apart. "Get in here," Jane ordered, forcing her voice to sound steadier than she felt. The children's small forms rushed toward her, hands outstretched, clinging. Tears pooled in her eyes, each drop a testament to their shared dread. The sobs surged louder, haunting melodies that squeezed her heart. As they huddled together, a shadow peeled away from the wall, stretching across the kitchen floor. Jane's heart lurched as it crawled closer, curling like smoke against their small, salt-protected haven. It paused, and in that moment, Jane felt an unnatural calm wash over her. The sinister pull of the shadow beckoned. "Where are you hiding?" it rasped, the voice malicious yet unsettlingly innocent. "Leave us alone!" she screamed, the gesture instinctual and filled with a mother's fury. Yet the figure seemed unfazed, crouching lower, its face a smear of darkness with hollow, glimmering eyes. "We just want your children to play forever." Each word dripped like poison into the air, corrupting the thin veil of safety they clung to. In that instant, sheer dread clutched her heart. She turned to the children, horror gripping her as she saw their innocent faces, reflecting an eagerness she had never wanted them to experience. They looked up, eyes sparkling with a strange light, as if they were being lured by something deep within the shadows. "Mommy, can we play?" Max whispered, a small tug of innocence warped into insidious yearning. "No, you can't! We've got to get out!" Jane grabbed holds of their hands, yanking them back towards the front of the house. The shadow recoiled, twisting into a tower of gibbering whispers as Jane pulled her children toward the door. Each step away unleashed painful screeches and indignant cries from the depths of the darkness, vibrating through the very foundation of the house. It craved them, and that hunger was palpable. "Faster!" she cried, but the oppressive air thickened, dragging them back. The door, just a few more steps, stood like an unyielding wall. But as they turned the corner, something cold slapped across her back, a dampness that froze her in place. "Too late," the shadow hissed, cold breath swirling around her, creeping into her mind, wrapping it in tendrils of despair. Jane's resolve faltered. How many children had played here before? She could sense it. 12 souls, gripping desperately for those innocent lives. Would they soon join the parade of lost spirits or uncover the truth that tied the haunting to her family? The question clung heavily as the shadows closed in, a swarm ready to extinguish their last flicker of hope. In that nail-biting moment, Jane knew. Uncovering the secrets of this house meant confronting the shadows and their monstrous demand. Would she summon the courage, or would they be the next chapter in the cursed history? Jane's heart raced as she felt the cold wrap around her like a vice. The fear was palpable, clinging to her skin like fog. She gripped her children tightly, their small forms trembling against her. She couldn't look back. She dared not meet those hungry eyes that whispered sweet promises of playtime. Their innocent glee twisted into agonizing shrieks that pierced the air, drowning her with despair. "Keep moving. We have to go," she urged, dragging Max and Lily toward the door. Their world had shrunk to just this hallway, these moments. The air hummed with malevolence, and every footfall sounded like thunder in her chest. As they neared the front door, the shadows surged. They flickered, but remained relentless, lingering just out of sight, yet always just within reach, a taunting presence. Jane willed herself to reach the threshold, to get outside into the open air, where she might regroup and figure out a plan. But the door stood solid, mocking her efforts like a fortress. "Mommy, I don't want to leave," Max cried, a tremor in his voice. It was as if the shadow's call was pulling him, scratching at the edges of his innocence. "No," Jane shouted firmly, her eyes blazing with desperation and protective fury. "You don't want to play with them. They're lying." A laugh echoed from the shifting darkness, chilling her to the bone. It was a sound laced with familiarity, a haunting tinkle that twisted her gut. "Children never want to leave. They want the fun to last forever," it echoed, the shadows stretching, reaching with greedy fingers toward her beloved kids. What had been playful laughter turned sinister, a reminder of lost souls trapped in endless games. "Hold on to me," Jane exclaimed, pulling them even closer as her heart threatened to break under the weight of their shared terror. She took a deep breath, quickly sprinkling salt she kept in her pocket on the ground between them and the increasingly voracious shadows. A moment's reprieve granted her focus. Growing determination surged through her as she scanned her surroundings for something, anything. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "You'll see," Jane whispered. She grabbed a heavy kitchen knife that lay abandoned on the counter beside her, feeling its cold metal in her grip. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of her fight, her refusal to give in. "Mommy, I'm scared," Max whimpered, pressing his small body against her leg. "I know, baby, but we can't give in." She nodded toward the door, steeling herself. "We're leaving this house together, no matter what." With resolve, she stepped forward, clenching the knife, her heart pounding like a drum. The shadow snarled, lurching closer. Jane raised the knife, and from deep within, she felt a surge of courage. "Get away from us!" she screamed, and as if her voice were a spell, the depths writhed and shied back for a brief moment. The dark figures recoiled, screeching in outrage, shadows twisting like living nightmares. Taking the opportunity, Jane yanked the door. It resisted, screeching against the frame as though alive. With a furious kick, she forced it open, and a flood of reluctant light burst in, almost blinding her. Before her lay the outside world, beautiful yet terrifying in the light of the failing sun. But just as they stepped toward freedom, she heard it, a reverberation that shook her to the core. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." Her heart sank. Time seemed to stretch as she and her children stood frozen in the doorway, the malevolence roaring behind them. Was it too late? "Mommy," Lily's voice broke, and a glimmer of doubt flickered in Jane's mind. What if the shadows were right? What if they couldn't escape? Their next move would seal their fate, but the uncertainty hung in the air like dark clouds. Light and hope countered by the relentless shadows. Would they turn away now, or face the truth lurking in the darkness? It was a choice that could change everything. With the shadows reaching for them, the question weighed heavily in her heart. How far was she willing to go to protect her children? What sacrifice might be necessary to break the sinister curse that hung over them? As she stood at the brink, Jane knew they were poised on the edge of something frightening. The worst had yet to come. Would they discover the truth behind the malevolent spirits, or would they stumble deeper into the shadows? Jane felt the shadows tugging at the edges of her heart, a visceral pull that whispered in mournful tones. The door swung wide, but the threshold was a barrier that seemed to shimmer with dark intent. A sudden chill swept through her, sharper than the knife she clutched. It was a reminder of the danger that was faster than her own thoughts. "Mommy, I want to go home," Max cried, his voice strained with panic. His little hands grasped desperately at her shirt, his wide eyes pleading with her as if she could simply wish away the dread that loomed over them. "No, we can't go back," Jane shouted, urgency fueling her voice. "Stay with me." The shadows writhed, something alive and in pain, as if they could sense her turmoil. The laughter swelled again, mocking and bitter, carrying on the air like a dreadful melody. "There's no home to go back to, dear Jane. Home is where you will find your eternal playmates." She felt her pulse quickening, each beat a reminder that time was slipping away. The knife felt heavier in her hand as she prepared for what was to come. Jane stepped forward, resolute. "We will not be tethered to you." But just as they began to move, a gust erupted from the depths behind her, an icy breath of shadows that clawed at their ankles. She staggered back, feeling as though the ground beneath her shifted. "Run!" she shouted, swinging the knife wildly, hoping to strike some sense into the darkness. "Run, now!" Max hesitated, his small body frozen in fear as the shadows clawed upward, stretching and straining to reach the children. Jane felt a wave of bitterness blend with her resolve. She knew she had to be strong. Ripping Max from the grasp of unseen hands, she bolted into the open night. The world outside was jarring. Moonlight bathed everything in silver, contrasting the encroaching black that clawed towards them. They stumbled onto the lawn, dew-soaked and cold, Jane dragging her children behind her as she dashed toward the trees lining the yard. "Mommy, help!" Lily screamed, gazing back at the angry darkness, fingers reaching futilely toward whatever torturous essence had claimed their home. "Lily, focus! Just run!" Jane shouted, her voice hoarse and strained. Every step felt like drawing them away from a grave.
The treetops whispered above them, their rustling leaves creating a sound like shuffling footsteps, underscoring the dread that chased them. As they reached the tree line, Jane turned to lead them deeper into the woods. It had to be safer there, away from that house filled with things that pretended to be friends. The shadows pursued them, pouring out of the building in a wave of despair, their laughter contorting into a chorus of agony. How can they do this? She wondered aloud, breathlessly running, clutching her knife as if it could protect against the onslaught of fears manifesting behind them. What do they want? But just then, a sharp pain pierced her left arm. Jane looked down, horror swelling in her chest. Darkness sprouted like vines from her skin, cold, creeping, and ravenous. She felt a presence crawl along her veins, tightening with a vice-like grip around her heart. Then the shadows spoke again, sweetly, like a siren. "Oh, Jane, you can't escape what you are. You will always come back to us." Fighting back nausea, Jane held her breath, mind racing. They needed to break free. Her heart sank with terrible clarity. How could they ever truly escape when it felt like the darkness was worming its way into her very essence? "Mommy, what's happening?" Max whimpered, wide-eyed and trembling. With fierce desperation, Jane ducked behind a thick tree, yanking her children close. "We have to find a way to break this. We can't let them have us." The shadows hovered just at the edge of the tree line, boiling in frustration. "There's no escaping the inevitable," they chimed harmoniously, a horrific choir of children's voices turned wicked. How can they do this? She wondered aloud, breathlessly running, clutching her knife as if it could protect against the onslaught of fears manifesting behind them. What do they want? But just then, a sharp pain pierced her left arm. Jane looked down, horror swelling in her chest. Darkness sprouted like vines from her skin, cold, creeping, and ravenous. She felt a presence crawl along her veins, tightening with a vice-like grip around her heart. Then the shadows spoke again, sweetly, like a siren. "Oh, Jane, you can't escape what you are. You will always come back to us." Fighting back nausea, Jane held her breath, mind racing. They needed to break free. Her heart sank with terrible clarity. How could they ever truly escape when it felt like the darkness was worming its way into her very essence? "Mommy, what's happening?" Max whimpered, wide-eyed and trembling. With fierce desperation, Jane ducked behind a thick tree, yanking her children close. "We have to find a way to break this. We can't let them have us." The shadows hovered just at the edge of the tree line, boiling in frustration. "There's no escaping the inevitable," they chimed harmoniously, a horrific choir of children's voices turned wicked. With her mind racing, Jane searched for something, anything, that could help them escape. Above them, a branch cracked under the weight of unseen souls, and an idea began to form. As she watched the darkness pulse and writhe, her grip tightened around the knife. "There has to be a way," she murmured, urgent determination sparking in her eyes. But the shadows were aware, sharpening their focus back on her. Terrifying glimpses of ghostly faces flickered within, smiling grotesquely, tighter than a noose. Something or someone from behind the veil was watching, and dread wrapped around Jane's throat like a noose. "Mommy, no! Don't let them take us!" Lily begged, as if sensing the sinister echo in the trees. In that moment, a choice lay heavy on Jane's shoulders: fight or surrender. Gulping down her fear, she steeled her resolve. And just as she decided to confront the darkness, a howl ripped through the night, echoing in the woods like an ancient call. What had she awakened? "Mother," came a distinct voice from the dark. "Come to us." The trees seemed to shift, distorting the moonlight, as the shadows glanced towards a deeper part of the forest. a place where even the bravest dared not tread. Jane's heart pounded with the weight of the unknown. What lay beyond the edges of familiar terror? Driven by instinct and her love for her children, Jane turned to the darkness. Would she risk it all for a chance at freedom? The shadows were closing in. Time was running out. What could be lurking just beyond the trees, waiting to be uncovered in that wretched realm? Jane took a step forward, knife raised with fury, faced with an impossible decision. A sudden hush fell over the forest, as if the woods themselves held their breath, anticipating Jane's next move. The shadows shifted, dark tendrils stretching toward her, curling with a hunger that knew no bounds. She could almost feel their chilling whispers against her skin, taunting her with promises of despair. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming surge of anger. "You won't take my children!" she screamed, a wild desperation churning within her. Max and Lily clung to her side, fear evident in their trembling forms. The darkness paused, as if reconsidering its approach, drawn by the intensity of her defiance. "Mother," the voice called again, laced with a crooked familiarity that chilled her bones. It sounded so much like her own, wrapped in an echo she dared not face. She looked toward the deeper thicket, blinded by shadows, but drawn to a flicker of light that pulsed softly, beckoning her closer. "Stay behind me," she warned her children, her voice a sharp blade cutting through the night. With trembling hands, she readied the knife. Each step deeper into the woods felt like crossing an unholy barrier, the ground squishing beneath her feet, soft and deceptive, as if it were alive. A gust of wind howled, swirling leaves and twigs around her like frantic spirits. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, forming grotesque figures that slipped in and out of sight, feeding off the fear in her heart. Gritting her teeth, Jane pressed on. Through the underbrush she spotted it, a clearing bathed in an unnatural light, luminous and inviting. The air smelt sweet, a contrast to the acrid bitterness that clung to the shadows. In the center stood an ancient stone archway, gnarled roots twisting up its weathered columns. "Mommy, please," Max whimpered, his small voice cutting through her daze. "What is that? I'm scared." "I know, honey, I know," she replied, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "We can't go near it." But even as she said the words, she felt the pull of the archway, a magnetic force tugging at her very being. They were drawn toward it, almost against their will. What if it was a way out? A ripple of laughter filled the air, cruel and smooth, echoing around them. "Come, Jane, it has been waiting for you. Your fate is intertwined." The shadows began to swirl harder, thick and horrible, shrinking their escape route. Jane felt the chill creep back into her bones. She glanced at her children and saw their faces pale against the rising terror. Without thinking, she charged forward, knife raised. "Back! I won't let you take them!" she shouted, crashing through underbrush as darkness crept at their heels. With one desperate lunge, she was upon the archway. The moment she crossed beneath its shadowy structure, the air thickened, swirling in eddies that clung to her skin like a nightmare refusing to release its grasp. In the flickering light, the children's screams echoed, reverberating off ancient stones, merging with the cacophony of shadows desperate to reclaim her. "You belong to us," the voices sang sweetly, mocking her bravery as her grip faltered against the knife. "Mommy!" they cried, instinctually reaching for her, their voices slicing through the haze. The light pulsed quicker, a strobe of confusion, illuminating faces within the darkness, faces she recognized. friends, family, all twisted in pain and yearning. How? Suddenly, as Jane's heart raced, the archway trembled, its stones cracking, a deep voice reverberating from the depths. "You wish to leave? You know the price of departure." The knife slipped from Jane's hands, clattering to the ground. The shadows twisted violently, slicing through the air like malicious blades. One thought consumed her. Was escaping worth the cost? And then, rising above the laughter, a chilling silence fell, all-consuming, as if waiting for her answer. The light above dimmed, the shadows shifted, and the forest held its breath. And then she heard it, a low, ominous growl reverberating through the ground beneath her feet. As the shadow swelled, something deep within the archway began to emerge. What was about to break forth from the depths below? "Run!" Jane screamed at her children, just as a shape rose into view, cloaked in darkness and rage.
Horrific faces twisted and howled, waiting for her choice. Would she surrender her children to save herself? The choice echoed in her mind. "Mother!" The voice whispered again, sharper, more demanding now. What was waiting in the shadows? Jane knew there was no time to hesitate. But in that moment of indecision, they began to fade, each path swirling into a chasm of possibilities. Which would lead to their salvation and which to their doom? The shape surged upward, boiling out of the archway like smoke, a black mass seething with eyes that glittered like broken glass. The forest was no longer silent. It erupted into chaos. Roots creaked and branches snapped as if the trees themselves were trying to escape the horror that was being birthed from the shadowy depths. "Mommy!" Max and Lily shrieked. They instinctively latched onto her legs, tiny hands grasping desperately, pulling her back toward the tree rind. Jane could feel their fear pounding in her heart, a wild rhythm that matched her own. She stilled herself, focused on the darkness spilling forth, a torrent of despair wailing through the night. She scanned the clearing, looking for anything they could use. The knife. Where was the knife? Panic surged again as she remembered dropping it. Her eyes darted to the ground, but the darkness consumed the spot. "Please, not my children!" she yelled, clutching them tightly as the mass began to shape itself, elongating into twisted human-like figures, specters of people she once knew, fingers outstretched towards her, mouths moving in silent screams. They weren't right. Something was off. Their faces were a grotesque parody, a taunting echo of affection turned malevolent. "Step back! Don't touch them!" Instinctively, she stepped in front of Max and Lily, her heart ledgering an impossible balance between protectiveness and despair. A soft rustle, barely audible over the cacophony, pulled her attention. The ancient stones of the archway glimmered once more, silver dust swirling within their cracks. She could feel the energy flow through the air, an invitation laced with a sinister undertone. "Mother!" The voice called again, clearer now, resonating in her bones. It was disarming, enthralling. Even as adrenaline coursed through her veins, she felt the weight of an ancient pull, seductive yet tainted. "What do you want?" she gasped, desperately trying to summon courage. Her throat felt raw, words barely scraping past the fear. "We want what you owe," the shadows hissed, their tones slipping from sweet to a sickening growl, each word dripping with malice. "Sacrifice, Jane, your children for your own freedom. The cycle must continue." "No," she breathed out, tears brimming as she clutched her children tighter. They didn't understand, and she couldn't let them. Not this, not ever.
The specters groaned in unison, their bodies collapsing into unearthly forms, a haunting symphony of grief and rage. Jane trembled, her resolve wavering.
Suddenly, Lily whimpered, "Mommy, I don't want to die." "No, no!" Jane felt a wave of panic wash over her. "You're not going to die. We will get out of here." She watched as the shadows surged closer. The figures reached their hands out, almost like a loving embrace, and the closer they got, the more suffocating the darkness felt, pressing against her soul. Her grip on her children threatened to slip. She couldn't let go. With a scream of defiance, she lunged for the archway, desperate for that pulsing light. Maybe it can save us, she thought, even if it was a lie. In the fray, she shouted, "We're leaving!" Lily let out a small whimper, and Max's eyes widened, luminous with fear. Yet they stayed at her side, even as the shadows surged forward, hungry for their presence. Jane felt the pull of the archway intensify, as if it promised them salvation from the horrors closing in. But the darkness wouldn't allow it. It pressed against her body, cold and unbearable, and the voices rose in a fever pitch, taunting, screeching, "You will never leave!" The archway flickered, the light dimming, distorted, as if the reality itself was unraveling. Jane felt like she was being torn between two worlds, both alluring and terrifying. "What should I do?" she thought frantically. The answer was slipping away, just like the grip she had on her children's hands. And in one ear-splitting moment, as the tendrils of shadow threatened to ensnare them completely, she caught sight of a faint glow rising from below the archway. Another exit, or perhaps a hidden terror? "Jane," came the voice again, that familiar call laced with darkness. It was no longer a question, it was a command. As the shadows wobbled around her, blending with her doubt, Jane felt the question lodged in her heart. Will she let go or fight to the end? From the depths came a crashing sound, like fate itself tearing through the night. And just like that, Jane was left standing at the precipice, choices swirling around her, like the fading echoes of her children's cries. Would she be consumed by the darkness, or find a way to fight back? Her heart raced, and she was left wondering, what would be unleashed if she took that step into the light? The shadows tightened, coiling around her like a snake ready to strike. Jane's heart pounded, each beat a drum heralding her doom. She could hear the whispers thickening, growing impatient and sharp. "Embrace the darkness. Join us." The words soaked into her skin, an icy grip tightening around her throat. Her children were still pulling at her, little voices trembling. "Mommy, please." "Don't be afraid," she shouted, forcing herself to power through the suffocating dread. She had to be the anchor, the shield, anything but the wretched sacrifice the voices demanded. Max squeezed his sister's hand tighter, his wide eyes darting to the figures creeping closer. For an instant, Jane feared the worst. What if the figures were right? What if she couldn't fight them off? The faint glow from the archway flickered again, sparking something deep within her. That light, could it truly be a way out? With a swift breath, she focused on it, her anchor. "No, not today," she yelled into the malevolent frenzy. The darkness shrieked back, a cacophony of anguish, twisting and writhing in protest. "You think you can defy us?" The shadows pulsed, rippling like a living thing, hungry for her recognition, her acceptance. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mass, sharper than the rest. With the unmistakable visage of her mother, Agent Summerfield transformed into a ghastly reflection of the woman Jane once knew. The warmth of family blurred, replaced by something grotesque and painful. "Join us, my love. You can't protect them forever." It reached out, fingers curling, a sickly sweet smile twisting on its lips. "Stay away!" Jane screamed, instinctively stepping back. She felt instinctual horror bubble up. The specter was right there, its eyes like deep black wells, pulling her in. "You're not her." "It could be easier, Jane. Make the choice. Release them," the voice purred, seeming to come from every shadow, wrapping her in suffocating certainty. Suddenly, Lily gasped, drawing Jane's attention. Her daughter stood frozen, entranced by the spectral figures weaving through the shadows. "Mommy, it's Grandma." "No, it's not!" Jane lunged forward, shaking Lily, fear slicing through her. She looked into her daughter's wide, glassy eyes and saw not curiosity, but dread. "Stay with me! Focus!" But as she shouted, more figures emerged from the dark, each one a twisted version of someone Jane had once loved, friends, relatives that had faded from memory. The agony of each face struck like a dagger through her heart. They grinned, mouths unhinged, a warning: darkness claims all. With a trembling breath, she turned, yanking her children closer, their fear spurring her own resolve. "We're going to make it! Follow me!" Jane barreled toward the archway, her vision narrowing on the faint glow. It beckoned like a lifeline amid the dark storm around her. But as she approached, the shadows thickened, clawing at her ankles, dragging them back. "Leave them!" the voices screeched, overpowering and frantic. "They will perish as you fight. They're mere weights to your freedom." "No!" she cried. The archway flickered, as if sensing the intensity of her desperation. With a last surge of determination, she yanked her children against her side. "Hold on tight. Whatever happens, don't let go." With a primal scream, Jane lunged forward, tearing through that wall of darkness. Light engulfed her, searing and blinding. But as the shadows grasped at her, she felt something break within her, a crack in the very fabric of her being. The figures shrieked, their forms disintegrating, shriveling back into the abyss. Yet for every wretched figure torn away, another seemed to rise, swirling around her in a vortex of chaos. The light dimmed, and for a fleeting moment Jane thought she could hear the echoes of her children's laughter rising above the turmoil, but it warbled, a song twisted and wrong. Perfectly aware of the danger lurking ever closer, Jane's breath quickened. She realized that stepping into the light might not mean rescue. What if it turned to ash before her? The archway's glow remained steady, yet beckoned her forward like bait on a hook. If this wasn't a way out, then where would it lead? Struck by terror, she hesitated. Then the whisper erupted once more from the void. "You cannot escape your fate." As the shadows lunged again, Jane felt the weight of the choice rest heavily on her chest. Would she face the light or drown in darkness? "Make your decision, Jane," echoed a voice, sharp and piercing, as another figure clawed towards her, a familiar shape turned sinister. And in that moment of indecision, Jane had only one thought lingering in her mind. Why was the light so enticing if it might lead to despair? What if I fall into a greater horror? Jane stood at the precipice, heart racing as the shadows clawed at her ankles. There was an urgency that pressed upon her. Every second felt like a countdown to annihilation. The whispers swirled around her, a tempest of voices weaving a tapestry of fear and despair. "You are already ours," they insisted, their tones dripping with malice. "Get back!" she screamed, feeling the heat of panic wash over her. She tightened her grip on her children, their small bodies trembling against hers. They were her lifeline, but they also felt like dead weight as the darkness grew stronger, more insistent. The archway glimmered, but now it seemed like a cruel joke. Was it a promise of salvation or a trap? Jane's mind raced, grappling with the choice unfolding before her. The echoes of her children's laughter twisted into haunting cries, and she fought to drown them out.
No, not my kids. You won't take them. The figure of her mother loomed larger, its twisted smile both terrifying and familiar. And in that moment of indecision, Jane had only one thought lingering in her mind. Why was the light so enticing if it might lead to despair? What if I fall into a greater horror? Jane stood at the precipice, heart racing, as the shadows clawed at her ankles. There was an urgency that pressed upon her. Every second felt like a countdown to annihilation. The whisper swirled around her, a tempest of voices weaving a tapestry of fear and despair. "You are already ours," they insisted, their tones dripping with malice. "Get back!" she screamed, feeling the heat of panic wash over her. She tightened her grip on her children, their small bodies trembling against hers. They were her lifeline, but they also felt like dead weight as the darkness grew stronger, more insistent. The archway glimmered, but now it seemed like a cruel joke. Was it a promise of salvation or a trap? Jane's mind raced, grappling with the choice unfolding before her. The echoes of her children's laughter twisted into haunting cries, and she fought to drown them out. "No, not my kids. You won't take them." The figure of her mother loomed larger, its twisted smile both terrifying and familiar. "You can save us all, Jane. Just step into the light." It stretched out a hand, fingers curling as if inviting her into a warm embrace. The darkness thickened around them, the air heavy with dread. "Stop it!" Jane yelled, shaking her head, desperate to resist the pull of the figure. The ground quaked beneath her feet, the shadows swirling like a wild storm. "Join us," the voices chanted. "You can't protect them forever. You're out of time." Max's voice trembled. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Hold on," she whispered fiercely, squeezing his little shoulder as if her grip alone could protect him. She had to choose. With a swift glance toward the archway, Jane took a step forward, driven by instinct and love. Behind her, the shadows retaliated, shrieking with furious indignation. "Leave now, or you will lose everything." The ground beneath them began to crack, fissures of swirling darkness yawned wide. Jane's heart raced. Her eyes reflected a pain Jane had fought to escape, but all too familiar. A reminder of how the past clawed at the present, seeking to drag her back. "No!" Jane cried out defiantly, desperation steeped in each breath. "You're not my mother! You're just a shadow!" Rage gave her strength, a flicker igniting against the all-consuming dread that threatened to swallow them whole. The archway pulsed again, beckoning her with an ethereal glow, a siren's call whispering promises of safety. The weight of impending choices pressed against her chest. "This is your chance, Jane. Escape. Join us." The shadows crooned in unison, their tones hypnotic, each voice a dagger aimed directly at her resolve. "Choose!" hollered the darkness, blending voices echoing like a dreadful chant that crept into her mind. Could she bear the truth of that light? What lay behind that luminous veil? Was it freedom or the sacrifice of her children? "Mommy!" Lily whimpered, her little voice cracking against the storm. Jane felt sick. Their fear was palpable, rooting her feet to the ground even as the darkness wove itself closer. "Please, don't let them take us!" With a sudden surge of clarity, Jane swelled with a fierce determination that banished the paralyzing grip of fear. Not just for herself, but for her children, her precious babies standing at the brink of despair. "You will not take my children!" she cried, her voice a battle cry against the relentless tide. As shadows lashed out, Jane broke the tight hold of the darkness, pulling her children close. "We're going to run, okay? No matter what." She felt the energy shift, the space around them crackling with tension, as if the very fabric of reality hung on her words. They took off, charging forward toward the shimmering archway as Jane's heart raced. Each step felt ethereal, powered by the love that thrust her forward, shielding her children from the cacophony of twisted souls threatening to tear them apart. Behind her, the darkness screamed, a dissonance of rage. "You will regret this!" But there was no time. She could hear the voices of those lost echoing all around. Yet, with every step toward that strange glow, the grip of fear lessened, transforming into a fierce sense of purpose. "Stay with me!" And as they reached the archway, the light engulfed them, swallowing up the shadows that clawed at their heels. Jane felt a rush, a blinding warmth pulling her in, lifting despair into shards of light. In that instance, they burst through, emerging in a world bathed in soft dawn. The sun spilled across the horizon in hues of gold and warmth, the crisp morning air filling her lungs like a refreshing balm. Stumbling slightly, Jane halted, turning to see the darkness ripple and recede behind them, howling in protest. The weight of that haunting presence sloughed off into the ether, trails of shadow dissolving like mist in the light. "Mommy!" Max cried out, staggering alongside Lily, eyes wide with disbelief. The sunlight danced on their skin like a promise. "We did it!" Jane beamed, disbelief and gratitude mingling in her chest. They were free, no longer bound to the torment of that cursed home. Relief rushed through her, stitching together the torn edges of her spirit. But then, an unsettling whisper floated through her mind, a haunting echo of that familiar voice. "You can never truly escape your past, Jane." "No," Jane exhaled softly, shaking her head against that insidious thought. She had made a choice, and that choice had been for her children. Turning to look at the horizon, she felt a pulse of hope. The sun was rising, a new beginning, a stark promise that even after darkness, light could emerge. They were safe, together, and she would ensure their lives remained woven in light, not shadow. "We'll make new memories," Jane whispered, holding their faces in her hands, tears of relief spilling as she gazed into their bright eyes. "We can have fun at the park," Max piped up, energy returning as he bounced on his feet, excitement for tomorrow blooming like a flower. "I want ice cream," Lily added, laughter bubbling between them like a joyous song. "Yes, but first, let's get as far from here as we can," Jane declared, a resolute tenderness gripping her heart. With one last look at the forest behind them, she felt free from its malevolent grip, and together they ventured down the path, ready to embrace a future which shone dazzlingly bright. But deep down, she knew she'd carry the lessons of darkness, reminding her to hold fast to the light. And that was enough. For now, they would chase the sun, together. Now remember, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Share your reactions and theories about this intense ending. Flood the comments section with your thoughts. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Together, let's keep the stories alive.